All right, we're going to make a pretty interesting mix of stuff here. Just some history. Back in the 50s, some guy, his name, which I'm so bad at names, but it escapes me, but he made this product called Starlight. And he proved it, and you can find this on YouTube, by covering an egg with his Starlight. It was kind of like a putty, plasticky stuff. And then he applied a blowtorch to it for a good 5 to 10 minutes at least, and then broke open the egg, and the egg was not cooked. There was maybe, I don't know, a quarter inch of this stuff around it. And it was cheap to make, he said, but he died. Sadly, he died with the recipe. He was protecting it so well so no one would steal it, and he never gave it away. But ever since, people have been trying to do this. So here's a recipe of something that should act like Starlight. And we're going to try it. There's in this recipe 40 grams of flour, 20 of sugar, 20 grams of baking soda, 20 grams of cornstarch, and 10 grams of borax. These are all mixed together and water is added until it becomes a putty. Interestingly, the melting point of steel is 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Glass is 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. And propane burns at 3,560 degrees. So the propane torch will melt these. But carbon melts at 6,432 degrees. 22 degrees, sorry about that. It has one of the highest melting points. And what that means is if you put a blowtorch on carbon, it's not going to do a thing. And Starlight and the product we're going to make both work because they produce carbon early on. And once carbon is produced on the surface, you can't get the heat through anymore because the carbon is dissipating it because of its high melting point. So that's the idea here. And we'll see if this produces enough carbon on the outside of this putty to protect whatever's inside of it. Or what I plan to do is make a kind of a putty pancake and hold it in my hand, put some pennies on it, and we're going to try and melt those pennies while I'm holding this putty. Hopefully it works. I think it will. So, all right, let's go ahead and make this mix. So here we have our 6 ingredients that we're going to make our product with, including the water. Now, the original recipe calls for 25 grams of water. That is not very much. Grams and milliliters are basically the same when it comes to water. But we'll start mixing these, and we'll then add enough water, I guess, to make it into a putty. All right. First, cornstarch, 20 grams. Dump. Actually, it's kind of fun because I did this all ahead of time. Come on, cornstarch. There we go. All right, next, sugar, 20 grams. Next, baking soda, 20 grams. I seriously wonder what would happen if I put all this in the oven. Borax, lastly, 10 grams. This is kind of not necessary, but it was suggested as an additive to make it work better, so I'm going to do it. But you don't absolutely need it, apparently. Borax. And finally, our 25 grams / milliliters of water, which, wow. Yeah, I just don't think that's going to be enough. But I'm going to go ahead and mix this up off camera, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, here I have our mass of dough. Basically, it's obviously, you saw the ingredients. There's a number of different things that make this up. I ended up adding approximately 35 milliliters of water, 30 to 35. And it turned out pretty good with that amount. But near the end, always add it in slow amounts or in slow volumes because it takes a while to work a liquid through a mass of powder because the powder tends to produce pockets. And you have to break those pockets down so that all of the powder is available for the liquid to soak into it. So here we have it. We're going to put some fire to it and test out this new fashion of Starlight. Okay, got my putty here. We made my fake Starlight putty. Now, I've never used this before, but of course, I'm certainly hoping it works as that butane torch down there, I'm sorry, propane torch will be burning on it. And I hope to melt those pennies right down there. Right on this putty. Okay. So, there's a good smattering of it. Now here's the amazing thing about it. It doesn't have to be that thick. This is probably 3/8 to a 1/2 inch thick total. Don't want any seams in it though. All right, put that over my fingers. Nice and smashed, just like dough from pancakes or something. All right, there's our pennies. And here's our torch. Couple of things. I can't feel anything. The bottom of this is still cold. Oh, darn it. And you can see the pennies starting to melt. Golly, why won't this stay up and work? Let's do it like this more. There we go. That's a better angle, I think. There goes some. 1 penny. You know what I think is happening? I think the dough is actually absorbing the heat and not letting the pennies directly in touch with it to melt right away, like that first one. Again, my fingers are cold. The dough is cold, and my fingers are still cold. This heat has not gotten through it. Looks like this is a pretty good sample of Starlight, man. It's working extremely well. And even for me, this is pretty remarkable. Well, you can see the pennies are completely destroyed. Just to prove that the torch isn't fake. Of course not. I mean, that's kind of silly, but... Fingers are still cold. I can feel the heat on my thumb a lot. It's not bad, but I can definitely tell it's hot. Well, I don't think they're going to melt. I have no idea what's happening, but the first one certainly melted. And my fingers are still cold. So, I think this is a good example of Starlight or something close to it. It's certainly working just really well. All right. Well, there it falls apart, actually. Well, you can see there's dough. Pretty darn amazing. One last note on the Starlight. This piece, which separated from the rest, is pretty telltale of how this works. And I mentioned it earlier at the beginning of this video. This is carbon that's formed. This is just hard carbon, which has a melting temperature, as we found out, over 6,000 degrees. It will not melt, and it cannot burn from a propane torch. And that's what makes it work. You can see even the pennies, some of the copper there, changed the color of the carbon just a touch where it was touching it. Anyway, yeah, pretty amazing stuff. I've said that a lot, I know.